أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. The Quran and social media. One might of course ask, what is the business of the Quran with social media? The Quran is a book that was revealed 1400 years ago plus. And it was a book that was supposed to connect people with God, tell them how to worship God, and it has nothing to do with our social lives. So how is it related to something that is related to technology, let's say, in this modern day and age? Some might say or assume that the Quran does not have anything to do with the social life, as if the Quran has nothing to do with organizing how we live our lives. The Quran, my brothers, my sisters, what it does is actually, it sets principles and guidelines for us in order to achieve happiness and in order to achieve security. The Quran multiple times, if you remember, it says, لا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون. Yes, seeking security and seeking happiness is something that all humans look after. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions multiple ways of how to be of those people who, what? There's no fear for them, nor will they grieve. لا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون. The Quran actually invites us and tells us that when the Prophet invites us to something, it is something that brings us to life or brings life to us. استجيبوا لله وللرسول إذا دعاكم لما يحييكم. The Quran tells us, answer the call of Allah and the Prophet when He invites you to that which revives you. This is what the Quran is doing. The Quran actually is, in a nutshell, what it contains is essentially, a set of, let's say, a pool of knowledge that feeds our thoughts, a set of principles that direct our emotions and relationships, and a set of guidelines that allow us to moderate our actions and behaviors. And this is what we are actually. We go and meet the world. We're moving within this framework of what? Of our thoughts, our emotions, and our conduct. This is how we deal with this world. Social media, right? So social media has become a part and parcel of our lives actually. Hardly would you find anyone who is not involved in social media in some way, shape or form, or any kind of platform. And we naturally then spend some time, maybe much energy on these platforms, which tells us that, okay, this is a resource that Allah has given us. And obviously, the Quran recommendations, guidelines, principles would apply. They would apply in that context. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us also that خُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. Man is created weak. We are weak, meaning that if we're left to our own selves, we will have a tendency to have our desires and inclinations overcoming us unless we govern it in a certain way with our intellect to direct it properly, to rectify our behaviors and our inclinations. So we need to strengthen ourselves. The Quran tells us, خُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. It means man is created weak. It tells us that we need to gain that strength facing whatever weakens us. So I'll mention a few applications on how could the Quran be relevant in social media context or in context of social media platforms. So number one, vain talk and idle talk. This is what is described in the Quran as laghu. Laghu is this vain, idle speech that you learn nothing from, basically. You learn nothing from. Nor does it harm you, neither does it harm you, nor does it benefit you. It will actually be harmful for you if you consider that you're spending time on something that you're not learning. You might be reading a long post. You might be watching, for example, some video that's also long. Yes? You're seeing what this person ate yesterday, where that person went, what resort went the other day. Right? Look at, come and let me show you my room, my house, and let me show you how I bake this, and let me, and you see people sometimes also wasting food, and you see things that are funny and silly actually. Okay, you're spending time on this. Imagine that this is something that is happening in front of you in real life. How would you behave with it? Imagine someone now stops you and tells you, okay, look, listen, let me tell you about what I did yesterday. I did this, I ate that, I wore this, look at my clothes, look at my, right? How would you behave with this? How is it benefiting you? Isn't this also an application of vain talk? Yeah? Why do we tend to think that social media is not the real world, is not? So when we are engaging with social media, we are different from us engaging in our real life. Why do we think so? Even if you created a fake account, you are still the same person. You're still the same person. This is still a vain talk. And we see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would tell us very clearly about the mu'mineen, about the believers. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنِ اللَّغْوِ مُعْرِضُونَ. Quran chapter 23 verse 3 tells us very clearly that the believers are people who avoid idle talk, who avoid vain talk. And sometimes what happens is that our curiosity pushes us to actually want to know more, want to know about other people, what they're doing, what they're up to. Of course, this is something that we need to be careful about. Or the Quran chapter 25 verse 72, when it says, وَإِذَا مَرُّوا بِاللَّغْوِ مَرُّوا كِرَامًا. Yes, the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when they come across laghu, vain talk, idle talk, false talk even, they pass to it with dignity. You know when you scroll, yes, I don't know if you know that once you open your social media platform, imagine that you have so many people who start recording every single thing in your behaviors on that platform. What do I mean? You spent that much time looking at this picture. Your finger touched that picture once, twice, zoomed in, zoomed out. It's recording your interest. And this is why sometimes you would see the algorithms learn what you're interested in and they give you the right feed. Yes? Imagine it like this. People are recording. Sometimes we think no one is watching. But no, those of you who know, who are understanding, how these technologies work, they know that you have so many counters and monitors that monitor you, how you're behaving on these platforms. And subhanAllah, it's very interesting actually with, when you see people recording, things about their lives on social media platforms. In the past, we used to think, how will it be on the Day of Judgment that Allah will show us what we've done, will show us, the story of our life. It's interesting that in this modern day and age, you could actually visualize it in a certain way. That, yeah, you could go to that, time and see what this person said, what that person posted, and so on. Another point, arguing. You see sometimes on some platforms, people like to argue. Some people like to just give their thoughts, give their opinions about something that it's maybe, not their area even. I just want to have an opinion. I want to criticize this. Why did they do that? That reciter, how did he say this? I don't agree. Some people become maraja on Facebook or on Twitter. Why is the, Ramadan? No, it should not be this day. It should be that day. Well, Eid, it should be this, but so you just want to give their opinions. And sometimes you see people engaging in arguments just because they want to engage in something. They want to have an opinion about everything. Also, similarly, on the social media platform, because sometimes this kind of virtual reality, it gives us the illusion that when someone talks, they're kind of protected. But imagine this is in the real world. People are talking about something. Would you be having that confidence of actually going and saying, well, no, that's wrong, about something you're ignorant about in the first place? Allah tells us in the Quran, chapter 17, verse 36, وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ. And do not follow what you have no sure knowledge of. Things that you don't know about. It's okay to be quiet and listen. Sometimes when you don't know something, you go ask, that's good. But when you want to have an opinion about anything and everything, where you don't have knowledge about, what are you doing here? Yes? So, and the things we do, the way we behave on social media, actually, as I said, it's not only recorded in these platforms, it's also wiring our own self, it's wiring our own brains, our own behaviors, actually. Yeah? And we become the way we behave on these platforms. Chapter 18, verse 49, it says, and the record of deeds will be laid open, and you will see the wicked in fear of what is written in it. They will cry, woe to us, what kind of record is this that does not leave any sin, small or large, unlisted? Yes, very interesting, very interesting. Everything is being recorded, even by those recorders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. An interesting hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, that he saw someone engaging in vain talk, speaking of vain talk. something that is just not relevant, not useful. Imam told him and he said, "Oh you, يا هذا إنك تملي على كاتبيك كتابا إلى ربك." Be careful. You are dictating to the scribes of your Lord a letter to your Lord. When you talk, these scribes are writing. فَتَكَلَّمْ بِمَا يَعْنِيكَ. So speak about things that you know about. Speak about the things that are relevant to you. And leave what is not of your business. Yes, this is how we should imagine when we're talking, when we're writing on social media as well. These remain. These remain. When you're talking, whatever words you utter, imagine that these are being written. Imagine, for example, I'll tell you now, like, look, okay, whatever you say, you will write it. It will be written, and that book or letter will be sent to, for example, Amir al-Mu'mineen, or to be sent to Lady Fatima alayhi salam. Would you still say these bad words that you say, for example? Would you still swear or slander or backbite or so? These will be written. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will be sent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah? So similarly, think about social media as this as well. Whatever you write, whatever you type. Sometimes some of us, they might type things and then look back at it, after 5-6 years, and they say, oh, why did I write this? Why did I say this? Yes? So had you engaged your thinking more at the time, you would have maybe done better. Suspicious thinking. Sometimes you might have people who will be writing something on social media. Someone is trying to make a point. And then you take a phrase and you take it out of context, and then you spread it, and you accuse that person, and you exaggerate it. Did you see what this person said? He said, there's no God. Well, Habibi, it's a part of an argument. He was saying a big post. Actually, he said there's no God, but you forgot to quote, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, So sometimes, and people might believe this, and they take it, and the news spreads like fire. Suspicion. Or someone, you might receive a picture of someone. Oh, look at this person. He's sitting in that place that's inappropriate. Around him, there's people, who look inappropriate. What is this person doing? He's supposed to be a believer, a mu'min. Suspicion. And then we think, oh yes, why so? We don't try to give excuses to people. We don't try to say, well, for example, maybe this is AI generated, and now you can easily, in the past it was Photoshop. Now it's much easier than that. Right? Has the Quran not told us in chapter 49, verse 12, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اجْتَنِبُوا كَثِيرًا مِنَ الظَّنِّ, O you who believe, avoid many suspicions, for indeed some suspicions are sinful. Some suspicions are sinful. So it is enough for you to know that, to avoid suspicion altogether. Much of it. You should avoid that. And when you get news, when you get something that tells you, look at this, did you see that person, what he said? Did you see, for example, or did you know that this person said that? You should go and validate it. You should go and validate it. Or sometimes you might see, well, Amir al-Mu'mineen, for example, said this hadith, and you see it's a beautiful hadith, it's a beautiful kind of phrase. But the wordings are just not good wordings as befitting the balagha of Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salam. Sometimes you have this, a beautiful word. Yes? For example, there was one thing that a friend of mine once he mentioned to me. He said, like determination is a train that takes you forward. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali bin Abi Talib. A train, yeah? At the time of Ali, for example, he said, a train. So, and some people take it and they feel, well, that's nice, that's good, yeah? Without going and validating. So we need to go and validate. Whatever we hear, we need to validate. Yes? Especially when things appear suspicious a bit, you go and validate. And that's also something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us, that that's when you hear something. And when they hear news of security or fear, Quran chapter 4, verse 83. And when they hear news of security or fear, they publicize it. Had they referred it to the messenger or their authorities, those with sound judgment among them would have validated it. Yes? And that's how rumors sometimes start. Someone starts something, sends something. Well, do you know that tomorrow the petrol stations will be closed because there's no petrol? Okay, I received this, and then immediately I forward it to a group. And then those forward it to their groups. And within 5 minutes, the whole country is locked down, basically. There's no petrol. And actually, the next day, there will be no petrol in the stations. It started from a rumor. The army of Muawiyah, that was a policy that he followed when he made people defect from the army of Imam al-Hassan to his army. And it worked. Why? Just throw a piece of news and see how it works. If those communities are not determined enough, strong enough, educated enough to know that, well, look, I need to validate. I need to put this in the context of what is going on around us. Validate. So this is one thing also that we notice on social media. Another is ghiba, backbiting. Says who that backbiting or ghiba is like when I'm sitting with someone in the real world talking about someone else. That's the only example of ghiba. Says who? If you, for example, you got to know something about the private life of someone, pictures or posts or something that is not available, not public, then you take it and you send it to public. You put it public, for example. Is this not an example of ghiba or betraying the trust or the confidentiality of the person? Yeah. Or sometimes, if I take a screenshot of a conversation that I had with a person, that person trusted you, in confidence, the conversation with in confidence, and then I take it and I post it. I say, look, right, this is that person. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in chapter 49, verse 12, وَلَا تَجَسَّسُوا وَلَا يَغْتَبْ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا أَيُحِبُّ أَحَدُكُمْ أَن يَأْكُلَ لَحْمَ أَخِيهِ مَيْتًا فَكَرِهْتُمُوهُ. And do not spy nor backbite one another. Would any of you like to eat the flesh of their dead brother? When you are engaging in backbiting, it is actually as if you're engaging in this very indecent, very disgusting act. That's how it is. That's how Allah describes it. Or sometimes this is something that, you find actually. You might come across a video of someone, talking about anger, how anger is bad, and someone, there are some people who are angry and who hit their families, their wives, their children, and, these are bad people and so on, and you see then someone mentioning their friend, mention. What is he doing then? Yeah? What is he doing? What are you doing with this mention? You're telling the whole world that, look, this friend of mine, he has that problem, and therefore, I'm actually pointing it to listen to that video or watch that video. Isn't this a way of ghiba? Ghiba could be by you pointing to someone, by you looking at someone, in a way that would be exposing. So let alone these kind of actions on social media. So we need to prioritize in these contexts. If someone, for example, suffers from something that is negative, we need to prioritize speaking in secret to them, advising them in secret, not in public. How many are the hadiths and recommendations that tell us that if you advise your brother in secret, it would be a great gift that you've given to him. But if you advise him in public, it would be as if you're insulting him, basically. These are things that also apply in the social media world, in the virtual world. And some people with these actions, they would be practically spreading indecency as well. Spreading the negative. To the extent that sometimes some people think that it's a label that we could label with it a whole people, a whole race, for example, a whole group of people. Why? Because there is someone who did something, and then the others wanted to spread it and label and judge people by it. Many other examples, of course, but in conclusion, my brothers, my sisters, you could see that sometimes you might see people ridiculing others, you might see people degrading others, judging others, you might see people spreading rumors about others. One thing, if I have to recommend, is that when we often see people's posts on social media, the blessings that Allah blessed them with, that they are on this holiday, they are in this place, they are eating in that restaurant, they are very happy. We assume that this is their whole life, and we forget that it's actually a snapshot of their long life. And then we actually look at our lives and we feel miserable about what we have. We then don't like our jobs, we don't like our places that we go, we don't like our friends, we stop liking our spouses, we stop appreciating the blessings that we have. So this is something that we need to be careful of. We need to be careful of. We need to put things into perspective and remember what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Quran chapter 20 verse 131, the translation of which, do not let your eyes crave what we have allowed some of the disbelievers to enjoy, the fleeting splendor of this worldly life, which we test them with. But your Lord's provision is far better and more lasting. We ask Allah that He may allow us to always remember His provision and to allow us, inshallah, that we behave, whether in the physical, real world or in the virtual world, as pleases Him. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Salawat.